Brian, how are you? Welcome to the podcast.
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Donna, hello.
Hello, hello.
Brian, um, I came across you on my YouTube feed. Smiles for Miles, man. Like, what a name for a YouTube channel. Smiles for Miles. And here's this nurse on house arrest with a ankle bracelet building a YouTube channel. Like, because what else is he going to do? And as soon as I saw that happening, and I came along, you came onto my feed right when you were reaching the end of that house arrest. So it's like, really, like when I came into your content, you were just like making that transition. And in fact, when I reached out to you, you didn't reach back for like a week because you were you were out the nest. You went on this big hike and celebrating. And so,
Beautiful.
Yeah, tell us a bit about the channel, man. Like, tell us a little bit about how that got started, where the idea came from.
Oh, yeah. And just I want to thank you both for having me on. I really appreciate being here, and I am really excited to talk to you. The channel, I came up with the idea of for starting a channel while I was sitting in county jail. It was pretty shortly after I had gotten arrested, and I kind of knew that I wasn't going to be getting out for a little while. I just started thinking about what I wanted to, just ideas were in my head, and I was still very much coming off of drugs, and I just kind of had this idea of starting a YouTube channel. Once I got out on house arrest, it actually seemed like I had, it was kind of the perfect situation to do something like that. I had plenty of time just locked in the house, which was my cell, and I, had just come off of this period of being incarcerated behind the walls, and there's so much time to just sit and think and read and learn and meditate and focus and just get your head straight. And it's sort of a very fertile time for lots of ideas. And so when I got to the house arrest step, I was, I had a lot of ideas about how I was going to use my time productively. After having lived a life of secrecy and a life of drug addiction and, living a double life, it just felt like the right thing to just speak about.
And so I hear a lot of YouTubers say that, actually. Oh, and by the way, if you want to check out Brian's channel, Smiles for Miles, there's a link in the show notes. So after this episode, don't go there right now. Just wait. But then go check it out and give him a sub. But what I'm hearing is the idea for your YouTube channel started when you were high and in jail.
Yeah. That's pretty much it.
Basically, yeah.
I think the intention
I just summed
of
it
the
right
channel
up.
at that time, my idea at that time was I was going to make a channel where I was on the run, basically.
On the run.
Yeah,
like,
that'd be hard to do. Like the
document
cops just like follow you on YouTube and catch you.
Yeah, it's just ping you. We should be cautious. We might be giving people
I don't even know how
ideas
that would work.
Yeah. Millionaire YouTuber, but also on the
On
run.
the run,
Yeah. I don't know if they'd probably shut down your monetization or something.
Oh,
If you were
Maybe.
making a bunch
Or-
of content on the run. I don't know how that would work.
yeah. I'm also
Right.
curious, so you got caught with a bunch of drugs, and you are a very mild-mannered, sort of reserved, happy kind of a guy, and you're not the type of person that anyone would think has served time. Where I'm going with this is I'm wondering what your experience was in jail.
It's interesting because before I was arrested, I was actually arrested on 2 different occasions. But I remember I was on my way in the cop car to county jail, and I knew all these stories and all these scary things, and I had no idea what was going to happen. But my main concern was that I was going to be withdrawing. And I think by the time I got through the withdrawals and stopped being the main concern, I had been in there long enough to kind of start to be comfortable. But I ended up, being the sort of easy-going person that I am. I just got lucky. I got put in the cell with some people who were kind of more like the pretty well respected in the prison population for the things that they had done, and just some like pretty serious gang leaders and stuff. And so they kind of took me under their wing because I was I just happened to be celled up with them, right? So
Yeah. You must have gotten a lot of like, what the hell are you doing in here? Like, you don't fit the bill.
Like, yeah, and that's interesting. That's an
Yeah.
interesting point. Like, what did those first conversations sound like with those murderous gangsters?
Yeah, that's these are great questions. I never even thought of it this way. It's funny. Yeah, when I was out on the street running around doing what I was doing, I kind of got that look sometimes, like, are you a cop? You know,
Are
are
you an
you
undercover, right?
No,
like,
I'm a
you know,
nurse.
yeah, exactly. No, I'm a nurse. I don't know if that's even any better. Convince people to believe me or to believe me.
Yeah, let me dress that gunshot for you.
Yeah, I did get some of that, and it was very much like, but I get turned away at times just because they're like, no, I'm not going to sell this to you, you know, because they just were so, but yeah, that was kind of more early on when I really got strung out. I looked a lot, I looked strung out, so it was a little bit more convincing. And when I got to county jail, I was very much at death's door, and I had been getting Narcan back to life all the time and stuff.
So let's take a step back then. Like, how did this all get started for you? Was this something that came into your life early on and just sort of evolved, or like paint us a picture here?
I grew up in a good, you know, pretty stable home. There were some issues, but for the most part, they were both present and attentive and very concerned and loving parents. I grew up in South Lake Tahoe, so it was a cool place to grow up too. Lots of outdoors. My dad was very particular about the way that my sister and I behaved. Very, you know, he would get very upset if we weren't perfectly behaved, even at a very young age. You know, he was very. Yeah.
I kind of figured
I'm the perfect father.
I kind of figured this was why you were exploring it.
I just wanted to make sure that I'm a better parent than your parents were. That's all.
Yeah.
Well, and if I may, just like
your...
our parents' generation and the generations beforehand, there was a very high expectation of perfect behavior, especially out in public at like all times. You know, like I think of sayings like, was that spare the rod, spoil the child, and all these sorts of, you know, it really, I think, gives insight into the mentality of how children were expected to behave, you know. And I think that a lot of us, you know, came out of that with some personality defects.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't take the garbage out without my full makeup on when I was 16, you know, like it was bad. But
this was kind of in combination with me being a very hyperactive kid who was just kind of had a lot of energy, and I would kind of get upset easily, you know, but also told to like contain this very much. So that's all just to say that I kind of wound up with issues where I was very self-conscious, people-pleasing, concerned what other people thought of me, primarily way more than I was concerned about how I was doing. End of senior year was the first time I tried a substance. The change of consciousness was something that there was this Band-Aid that it was offering me. And then when I would come off of those things, it would be so much more apparent how uncomfortable I generally tended to feel.
Sounds like by the time you entered nursing school, you were already addicted and knew that you were addicted.
Very much so. Very much so. I was with that same girlfriend that I was talking about. She just kind of decided it was her decision. She wanted to go to nursing school because it would give her some sort of career path or stability going forward other than just waiting tables. I started looking into it as well, and I decided that would kind of be the best move for me as well.
Did your partner know that you were using these things the way that you were? Like, was she a part of this? Did you guys use together? Like, what was that dynamic like?
We did have drug experiences together, but never consistently. I was never open with her about how much, or anybody for that matter, about how much I was using.
At any point in nursing school, when you started learning about different medications, and maybe you learned like even a little bit about addiction. Like, was there any point where you started learning things that like sort of clued you into your own struggles?
You know, a lot of the medications you learn about are kind of uninteresting as far as you know, a drug addict is concerned. Yeah, most of the things you're studying are just kind of are things that are not going to get you high. In fact, make them miserable. Yeah. Going into nursing was really stressful. I started on a trauma ICU unit, which normally doesn't happen. Usually you start on like med surg or telemetry. That's where I was originally hired. But I worked there for, it was about a year. And then we got married. All the drugs that, you know, are controlled substances are going to be in these machines called like a Pyxis. So you can't like get at whatever you want, but when you use medications, you sometimes don't use the whole vial or whatever it is. And then when you don't use the whole thing, you're supposed to waste it with another nurse. You're supposed to like throw it in a special receptacle that's locked that you can't get back into. Mm-hmm. And you're supposed to have another nurse witness you do that. And then you both sign off on it. Mm-hmm. Most of the time, you just kind of run up and put your code in and run out. You're busy, you know? So I realized that I could just drop it in my pocket without consequence. There's this real shame that comes along with it as far as, you know, I didn't even want to like really face it myself that I was doing that because it's just, there's something kind of sickening about knowing that your healthcare provider, particularly in a situation like an ICU setting where you're at your most vulnerable and the person who's watching over you is using drugs like mm-hmm. that. It's upsetting. It's sickening. And I felt like there's a tremendous amount of shame. I could see at times other nurses, particularly one guy that had even more brazenly stolen medications in certain ways that got caught. So I had seen that happen because he was just so desperate, I guess, to get something. There were several occasions where my wife discovered some paraphernalia that I had, you know, inadvertently left out. You know, the first time or two that she discovered this, it was just a big, scary confrontation where I was, you know, all apologies and like, there's no way that I can keep doing this. But I was always very insistent that I was going to take care of it by myself. Like, okay, I'm going to stop now. You know, you don't have to worry. Please don't tell anybody. You know, let's keep it a secret and I'll deal with it. And I would really intend to do that. We moved into an apartment in San Francisco. We moved back to San Francisco after having done some travel assignments. We get a call. It was actually New Year's Day of 2019, I believe, that her mom had ended her own life. And that was really just this, it was horrible moment watching my wife just crumble in that moment, her mom and dad. I was very, very close with them. Like I felt like they were second parents to me. So her mom, this happens with her mom, and she leaves to go back home to Tahoe to be with her dad and her sister and, you know, her family up in Tahoe. My idea was that I'm going to stay here and finish out the assignment. Once the contract is over, then I'll head back up to Tahoe and we'll figure out what to do from there. Right after she left that night, I think I went down into the Tenderloin. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I relapsed. People have asked me whether, you know, did you relapse because you were so traumatized because of what had happened? And that wasn't it. Although I was very shooken up. The thing that got me to go relapse that night, I believe that I was placing my motivation for being clean in her, right? I was kind of doing it for her instead of doing it for myself. And as soon as she left, I saw an opportunity. To me, it was like, oh, I can get away with doing this once. Obviously, that was the plan at the time, as it always is. Oh, I'm just gonna do this once or whatever, twice. And I just started using again. The other thing that happened after she moved back to Tahoe, got a call from her, and she had just gone with her dad to a doctor's appointment at the VA, and he was kind of out of the blue diagnosed that day with terminal pancreatic cancer and given like 2 months to live.
Wow.
So this was literally like a day or two after this incident with her mom had happened. So that was another blow. And I was even closer with him than I was with her mom. Like both of their parents were like parents to me, but her dad was just like a second dad to me. I finished out my assignment down there and I moved back to Tahoe. I applied for a job at a local hospital, got the job. When I was going through the intake process and doing all the intake stuff, part of it was a pre-employment drug screening, which I was always fine with. I had had those before. And usually, you just pee in a cup as long as I hadn't done anything. What I didn't anticipate was that they also did a hair follicle drug test, which goes back 90 days, or at least they look back 90 days. And I ended up ordering this shampoo online that's supposed to take it out of your hair and all that drug stuff. And I did all the washing and everything. I didn't want to really tell I wasn't honest with my wife about this. Like, hey, this is an issue. Maybe I should not take this job or something. I wasn't thinking that far ahead. I was just kind of in addiction. I'm like, I'm going to do this hair thing. I'm going to pass this test. Did the hair follicle drug test. Ended up getting a call that I had failed and that I and that I didn't get the job. A couple weeks later, or maybe it was sooner than that, I was at the grocery store and I got a call from my wife that said something had come in the mail that had said that I was reported to the board of nursing for that incident. And I just remember being like angry about it. It wasn't like, oh man, this is getting bad or this is getting serious. More, this is getting official now that my nursing license is being affected. I was just angry and I was like, how dare them, what's their business, what I do in my own time. I made up some excuse. I don't even remember what it was to my wife. And so I was under investigation now. But the investigation process would take some time. And in the meantime, my license would be unaffected. So I'd still be able to go get a job. So what I ended up doing was getting a job out of town at another hospital. And this place was about halfway between where I lived in Tahoe and San Francisco. And at the time, San Francisco was the only place where I kind of knew how to get the drugs I was looking for. So I just started this routine while my wife is in Tahoe taking care of her dying father on hospice. I'm going down early to work and driving, I would say I'm going to leave the night before so that I could just go down there and sleep and then go to work. But I would really drive to San Francisco and pick up more drugs, go work the 3 shifts and then go home. I was just out of my mind. My priorities were absolutely backwards. I didn't have any sense of what was important, at that point. Once he passed, she kind of, was spending more time over at our house, which was just down the street from where he was, and started to notice, I think, and one moment in particular when she really when it was all blown open is I was heading out to work to go down for my 3 shifts. This was only a few days after he had passed. And she wanted me to try on a shirt. And I was reluctant to take off my long sleeve shirt, which I was wearing long sleeves all the time because I had track marks everywhere. And just that hesitation, the way that I reacted to that and hesitated and tried to avoid it, she kind of was like, wait a minute, what's going on here? I need you to take your shirt off. I need to see your arms. And then I did, and it was just clear that I had been using, and it was just this like horrible, just breakdown moment for both of us. Really, like we both just completely started just sobbing like hysterically. It was just this breaking point, especially for her. She just after. It's like her mom and then her dad. And then just right after that, finding out that I'm just in deep with this again and just kind of coming to the realization of where we were at was just horrible. She didn't want me to go to work, but I insisted. When I got back from those 3 days of work, she had gotten in touch with some of my friends and they had kind of talked about what they were going to do. And they researched some rehabs, found a rehab that was about 5 hours away from where we lived. And she kind of asked my friend Joel, particularly which is one of my best friends, to just kind of come over and be there when I got home and talk to me. And I remember pulling up to the house and seeing that there were no cars in the driveway except for his. And I immediately thought, okay, there's a bunch of people in there. There's an intervention that's going to happen. So I went up to the door finally. I was like, okay, I guess I don't have any other choice. I knocked on it. He opened it. I'm like, the first thing I said was, who's here? And he said, just me. And so I walked in and he was basically like, okay, man, we're taking you to rehab. We know what's going on. And I just put up the biggest fight ever. I just completely am like, there's no way that this is happening. I can't do this. I'm in the middle of my nursing contract. Every excuse in the world. I can't do this. Finally convinced me to get in the car. And he just said I don't remember it this way, but he describes it to me as just, I was totally bipolar. Like I'd be cool and we'd be talking and then I'd just be completely out of my mind. I always wanted to keep taking breaks to go stop. I need to use the bathroom. I'd always be saying, so I'm disappearing into the bathroom for 30 minutes at a time. And he's like, I know what you're doing in there. And I'm still trying to lie about it. I'm still like, no, I'm not, there's no way to, deny this at this point, but I'm still trying to deny it and lie. I'm just still in that mode. He ends up dropping me off at rehab. I went through the 3-month program, finished it, got out, completely certain that I wasn't going to use drugs anymore. I was in a pink cloud, as they say. I was completely convinced that I was good forever. The thing is, the rehab program, while it was good, it was it didn't really get me behind any of the reasons that I started using in the first place. And I just went right back to my life when I got out. And I was doing really well for a couple of months. I ended up getting a job at the rehab facility that I went to. They actually had another location that was right near where I lived. And so they hired me on as their nurse while I was still under investigation for this drug test, this hair follicle drug test. And the lockdown happened and I didn't have to go to work all of a sudden. And I was in this house by myself, locked down, and I went out and I relapsed. And shortly after that, I got a call from her at in the middle of the night. And she's just like, you relapsed, didn't you? It's like she just woke up and something hit her. And she was just like, you did, didn't you? And I just said, yes, I did. And I was, and that was it. And so it was kind of like, okay, it's time to sort of maybe just seriously get a divorce now. And so we decided to do that. I kind of just said, I'm not going to fight this in any way. I'm just going to, walk away. We don't have to make this a legal thing. You can have whatever it is. You can have all the stuff, the house, you can have everything. I ended up getting this camper van. I bought a camper van and I started living in the camper van. I just walked away from everything. And yeah, that kind of ended that chapter. And this is the first time that I just kind of completely had given up on anything else and just fully was just driving around in this van, living on the streets, didn't have any responsibilities, didn't have anywhere to show up to, didn't have anybody to pretend to. There was a lot of pain at that time because I was very heartbroken about losing this relationship. I mean, we had been in this relationship for about 15 years, so it was a big deal. It was really hard to find consistent sources. It became this kind of dangerous mess where I would get stuff where I would be like, I don't even know what this is. And I just paid a bunch of money for it. Eventually, I got hooked up with this guy who had consistent stuff. But his thing was, I'm not going to sell this like a gram at a time. It's going to be like, you have to buy a lot. I don't just do little sales. And so I had this chunk of money left. So I got that from him. I spent a few $1,000s on it or something. I knew a lot of people who were using at this point. And so it got very, people started coming a lot. If I made a little extra money or something, that was cool with me, obviously, but I certainly wasn't like balling out of control or anything. But one of the things that was interesting to me though, was that there was this element of not living a double life anymore.
You were just being your true authentic self.
Well, yeah, that's what I thought at the time, but I've since learned that was not my authentic self. But yeah, even though it was such a horrible situation, there was some sense of tremendous relief just from not hiding anything anymore. Like everybody knew what was going on with me at this point. So I I was running around doing all this crazy stuff. There was like times when I crashed a car almost into somebody's house. There was this time when I got robbed at gunpoint. There was just all kinds of different crazy situations. Like in the midst of doing that, I was driving. There was this one time I was driving, not my van, but another car around Tahoe in the dark, in the middle of the night to go to Tahoe, and I fell asleep at the wheel and woke up to the car to just like that's like the way I came to. And when the car stopped, I was on this. I was just sideways, and like the driver's side door, I would have had to open it. When I opened it, I had like opened it like a hatch, and around me there were just rocks, and it was just dark. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know if I was on a cliff, because I was driving around the lake, and it was near Emerald Bay. There's these spots where there's huge cliffs. Wow. Everywhere, that you could just fly off of. So I didn't really know exactly where I was. I climbed out of this car, and these people ran up, and they were like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, yeah. And I was just kind of out of it. I was looking around like, yeah, I'm good. And I was almost, it turned out that I was up on this ledge and almost into this guy's house. I thought I was fine. And I was just like, damn it. I was just frustrated instead of just shocked at like what I had just done and who I could have just hurt, or if I got in a wreck with another car or whatever, or hit somebody. And then the people that I was going to were calling me, and they said, "Hey, where are you?" And I'm like, I just crashed my car, I'm just going to hang out, and I got to wait and talk to the cops. And they were like, "No, you can't do that. You have to get out of there. You can't talk to the cops. They're going to arrest you. You're going to get DUI right now." And they're like, "We'll come get you," even though it was like an hour or 45 minute to an hour drive for them. And they just, I just disappeared. I saw the cops come up, and I disappeared down this road, and I was just looking at GPS. It was pitch black outside. They ended up picking me up. And when we were driving back past the car, I remember looking up and being like, holy crap. And it was just way up on this. I can't believe how far it went up on this rock ledge just out. And they had a tow truck, and they were like pulling the car off of the ledge. And the cops like stopped us and was like, whoa. And I'm in the back seat, and he's just like, and they're like, oh my gosh, looking at the car. And the guy's like, yeah, I know, this is crazy. I don't know what happened. This car's just abandoned here. We're pulling it off, but you guys got to drive slow around here. And he's, but you can go though. Okay. I was like, okay. And I'm just sitting in the back seat, like they let us go by. Yeah.
So tell us then, like, getting arrested was like, tell us what happened there.
Somebody who gotten caught with some, and I guess the cops had convinced her that if she helped them get the person that she was buying from, which was me, then they would give her a lighter sentence or whatever. I don't actually know what ended up happening with that. I basically, she told them that I was coming back with this. And as soon as I crossed the California-Nevada border, I got pulled over and searched. And the drug dogs were there, and they searched the van, and they found all the stuff that I had. And they arrested me, and they took me to the county jail, Washoe County Jail in Reno, Nevada.
Like, what was your thoughts when those lights came on behind you?
When they came on behind me, I didn't think anything of it. I thought I was just getting pulled over for, whatever, tail light out or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. So that's what I was expecting. And he came up to the window and started asking me all these questions. So are you under the influence? Do you have any weapons in the car? I remember he said, and I said, no. And he's like, well, what's that then? And there was and I looked down, and there's like a kind of a knife, like a little knife on, like sitting somewhere that he could see. And I hadn't even realized that it was in here. It wasn't mine. It was just somebody dropped it in there. I was like, oh yeah, I don't know. I guess somebody left it in here. It fell out of their pocket or something. And then at that point he was like, let me have you step out of the car. And so that's when I kind of start to get nervous and stuff. And I'm just sort of like cooperating with him and just saying like, hey, okay, yeah, I'll totally step out of the car, whatever you need. And then he's like, we're going to search you. And I'm like, why? And kind of like in shock at this point. The only thing I could think to do was say, like, I don't consent to be searched. That's the only thing I could think of. I don't consent to be searched, but that didn't seem to have any effect on him at all. He was like, yeah, well, we're going to search you anyway, kind of thing. And they searched me and they found it. I remember him pulling it out of my pocket and like throwing it on the hood of his car, his cruiser. And by this point, there are like 4 other cop cars here surrounding me on the side of the road. And I remember him just saying like, ooh, that's a trafficking amount right there. So they finished searching me, and then they got the dogs out there and had the dogs search in the van. In the van, they found scales and baggies and obviously everything. And yeah, I just remember being numb at that point and not really knowing, like, I just was in shock and I was numb and I didn't know what was going to happen next. I just had no idea. I don't think I realized how wild it was until I started getting processed into the criminal justice system, and I started getting the reactions from people like, yeah, I have a bachelor's degree, and they would be like, no, you don't, like, kind of thing, like reactions, like, and so I kind of started to realize that I guess it was kind of rare for a person in my circumstance to like fall so hard and aggressively and wind up in a situation where I was basically living homeless as a homeless person. And that's where we started this conversation. I think I was on my way over there, just freaking out about how I was going to be withdrawing. I got in there, withdrew for 7 days. It was horrible. Ended up getting my friend to bail me out. And I just went right back to doing what I was doing. You know, I'd only been off of it for 7 days. I was still feeling like terrible. And it was in that period where the first time I got Narcan was in that period, in that 4-week period between my release on bail and my rearrest. And I got Narcan like 4 or 5 times in that period. So I think I was just like, my body was like bottoming out. One time particularly was very scary. We were driving back because after I'd gotten out, I again went back to get more, and I was heading back with 2 people, this friend of mine who was driving and a friend of mine who was in the back. And I was, and we pulled over. I was in the driver's seat. The next thing I remember is waking up to the car just speeding down the highway. I remember it was like this long, it was weird because there was like this experience of having this long tunnel. Everything was black and I didn't even know who I was or where I was, but there was like this long blackness, and way down in the distance, there was like this little something way down in the distance, and I couldn't see what it was. And I was just like, where am I? What's going on? And this thing kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then I realized that it was what was in this little square that I was seeing that was coming closer and closer to me was the road, freeway. And we were driving down it. And I think that was just because like the blood had gone from my head so much that like my vision had squeezed, like kind of shut down, and it was like kind of coming back online, like the blood was coming back in. And so it appeared as though this like picture was coming back into focus through a long tunnel. And as it got closer and it kind of full framed again, and I realized I was in the passenger seat of this car and we were speeding down the highway, and I look over and my friend Sims is driving and he's just pale as a ghost. Like, and then the girl in the back, Haley, was like hugging me from behind it, like crying. And all of this pain just came flooding in. And I was just like I felt worse than I've ever felt before in my entire life. Like I just like come back to life. And, you know, I don't know if you know anything about Narcan, but when you use it, it's sort of like you're just basically full on withdrawal 100%. And I was just like, what happened? What is going on? And what had happened was I'd done this and I just completely passed out, and they freaked out, and Sims had gone through the car and found some Narcan, luckily, while Haley was calling 911. Like, and I was like turning blue and like kind of like had stuff coming out my mouth. And he hit me with the Narcan, and I guess I stirred a little bit, like enough so that they knew I was still actually alive. And then they had taken me out of the car and put me into the passenger seat. And then he got in the car and they peeled off because she had just called 911 and they were on their way, which meant cops were on their way. And so their instinct was like, okay, he's alive. Like, thank God their instinct was to call the cops in the first place. But as soon as they saw that I was alive, they basically
Mm.
hopped in the car and peeled off because they're like, we cannot be here when they show up. And so they're just driving away from this scene. And then it was like shortly after that, within a couple of days of that, where I was rearrested. So that's when I was in for the long haul. That's the last time I used, September 23rd of 2021.
Okay, we're going to take a break, and I'm going to read off today's sponsors, and then we'll get back at it.
Okay.
EHN Canada is Canada's leading provider of mental health and addiction services, providing evidence-based and medically assisted care with 1-year wraparound services for those suffering with substance use disorder. To learn more, find their link in the show notes below. Métis Nation Saskatchewan has announced its path for the pursuit of self-government. As an MNS citizen, I am proud to see my government fight to protect my rights. This is our moment. To learn more about the treaty and our path to self-government, go to ourmoment.ca. Wellness News Choice for Healthy Living is a local resource that works to connect people to health and wellness-related products, services, and expert advice from industry professionals, locally allowing us to connect and engage. Check out wellnessnews.ca or skwellnesshub.ca today to learn more. If you'd like to see our content uncensored, we are now offering channel memberships. There is a lot we can't show you without getting restricted. So if you want the full conversations, or to check out our new merch, or if you want to show us some love and buy us a coffee, all of those links are also in the show notes below. Okay, so had you made the decision by the time that you were released that you were done with the substances?
It took a little while I was in there. When I was in county jail, I was very much still physically withdrawing and physically attached to the substances. The mental process of detaching from them took a little longer. I didn't want to be attached to these things anymore. I didn't want to be doing it anymore. I realized that it was a dead end. I realized I didn't want that to be my life. And I realized I couldn't do them anymore. But I was still struggling with the attachment to it. Like even when I got done with the physical withdrawal, if I was talking to a cellmate or something and it came up using, I would still get all wound up about it. Like by the time I got to the yard, it was probably like 5 months since I was arrested. So I had like a 5-month break before the drugs became available again.
Mm-hmm.
And it was around that time that that the kind of desire fell away. I started going to the weekly AA meetings that they had in there. I was like one of the few people that like showed up every week. But even without that, it wasn't like I needed any convincing anymore. There was something that happened in that process where I just realized where it wasn't just a realization that I shouldn't do this stuff. It was like the desire kind of fell away. I was starting to feel so healthy and clear for the first time in my adult life, and actually had a real break from any substances for the first time in my adult life, really. And so I just had so much time to sit, and I had a background of like being interested in meditation. And so I just kind of took it as like a meditation retreat, and I just treated it that way. And I really like just gained some insights into just what has been going on with me my whole life and why I even wanted these drugs in the first place. What happened was, like, instead of like withering away into self-loathing and self-hatred and just shame about everything that had happened, I had this instead kind of understanding that this whole thing that had happened, where, like you said, I'd been this nurse and I was successful and I owned a home and I had a wife and I had everything that I ever wanted. And all of that was just gone now. Not only just the material stuff and my wife and everything, but my reputation that I had like cared so much about, like I talked about before, like caring so much about what people thought of me, making sure like I put on this good image and so people liked me, and like that stuff mattered to me so much. And I realized when I was in there that, I fall into the basically rock bottom here. I'm in prison. There's no hiding from this reputationally. So it's just going to be so much, it's going to be so painful to care about what anybody thinks about me from this place. And so I kind of just gave up on that. It was like I got completely liberated from understanding that, what, I'm here. I'm the one that's here. I'm the one that has to be me. how I feel matters more than what other people think of me. And it was such a complete shift that I just kind of started to rebuild from there. And when I really got some time feeling into that shift, I haven't really struggled since then with a desire to use. And so that happened in prison. And then so by the time I got out on house arrest, it was kind of like I was already in that mode.
Were you at all in any way grateful that you were under house arrest?
Definitely don't want this to be taken as I'm a fan of the criminal justice system, because it's very it's not helpful for most people most of the time. But for me particularly, I feel like it was the best thing that could have happened to me, because the thing when you're incarcerated, you can make that time whatever you want. And if you don't have any structure with it, or you don't have any intention to change anything, then it can just be a mess, and it can be more charges. It could be more mess that you get into. For me, it removed any responsibility for anything else. There was nothing else to do. You're just in a cell, or whatever, or on the yard, or whatever you're supposed to do. I mean, you're so limited to what you have to deal with. It's such a rare opportunity in this life to be, a full-grown adult and be put in a situation where you actually have nothing to think about.
Yeah.
That's why I talk about on my channel. Just the reason I really started the channel was the idea of it was, I'm starting from scratch, and I just want to kind of document, even if it's just for myself, so I can look back on it and see where I was.
It's liberating, isn't it?
It's so liberating. Yeah. It was so liberating. The whole,
that's how I found it too. When I walked away from our house, I remember passing the keys over, because it sold. It was in the final stages of foreclosure, and it was trashed, like totally trashed and filled with garbage. And, that was my first house that I bought. And, I thought that it would be devastating to walk away from it. But as soon as I passed those keys over and walked away with my brother and got in the car and drove away with the desk that is now the desk that all of my computers sit on, which Hard Knocks Talks is being produced on at this moment, a desk that I built, I welded with my own hands, custom desk. That's all I left that house with. I mean, the last time. So that's something that's kind of cool, I suppose. But like it was
sort of
so
reverse
freeing.
your expectations. Yeah, you'd think that it would be totally different, but yeah. What being locked up taught me, and especially being on house arrest, when I kind of had my own space and I was able to kind of make my own routine throughout my day, I realized that wellness starts in here. It doesn't start with the stuff out here, and that's what I always thought before. I thought I needed to get all this stuff. I thought I needed to have a certain life to show, some stuff to show for my material things, like a certain setup, a certain career, I thought all that stuff was the stuff that made you feel okay. And it's just completely the opposite, because I learned that when I was locked in a room, or locked on house arrest with an ankle monitor, and I was starting from scratch, and I had nothing but a mountain of debt, so I was really starting from like zilch. I've experienced more wellness in this period than I've ever experienced before in my entire life. And I've been happier than I've ever been in my entire life over these last couple of years, especially as I was just recently released off the ankle monitor. I'm on parole now. I'm out in the world again. As new things get introduced, I'm sort of assessing them as like, how valuable is this to me? What does this mean to me? And I'm starting from here. Like, this is when I interact with somebody. Before, it was like, okay, what do I do to make them like me?
Yeah.
And now, and then I would end up getting involved with certain people that I really shouldn't be involved with, because I was just so eager to like be the liked person. And now I can look at somebody and just be like, is this somebody that I really want to be hanging out with or talking to? Like, what do I think of them? Yeah. That was another very liberating experience, is all of the things that become possible when you stop worrying about whether people like you or not. You know, like
Mhm.
I know what I know what my needs are, and I know how to set boundaries now for myself, you know, without being an asshole most of the time, hopefully. But
Yeah.
but
I mean, if
but
everybody
I know
likes
how
you,
to draw the line, you know.
yeah. Like if everybody likes you, you're probably not living your best life.
That's exactly right. Yeah. If
Yeah.
everyone likes it 100% of the time, then it's probably not that important.
Yeah. 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 Okay. Well, right on. Thanks for joining us today. That was an incredible journey, both like with the tech and also with your
Oh yeah.
there was like a couple of different layers of stuff going on. But thanks so much for joining us. And if you're still watching this far, don't forget check out the Smiles for Miles YouTube channel. Link in the comment section or link in the show notes. Brian, I guess we'll cap it there. So
Cool.
thanks so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure talking to both of you.
Thank you, Brian.
Say, this is Hard Knocks Talks.